They called it the loudest justice on vinyl. In the early 80s, four kids from Los Angeles and San Francisco forged a new alloy of speed and fury and named it Metallica. They toured in a beat-up van, lived on cigarettes and warm beer, and played like the world might end after each downbeat. It was not polish, it was purpose. In garages and basements, a generation learned to downpick their rage because Metallica showed them how. The legend begins with hunger but hardens through loss. In 1983, the band drove east to record, replacing their original lead guitarist with a young gun from the Bay Area named Kirk Hammett. The new lineup tightened like a fist. Then came Cliff Burton. Denim, bell-bottoms, wah-wah bass that sounded like thunder breaking a lock. His musicianship opened doors no thrash act had tried, dragging classical harmony and wild counterpoint into the pit. On stage, he was a lighthouse. Off stage, he was the calm that kept the temperature from boiling. September 27, 1986. A tour bus on a dark Swedish road. The vehicle skids, flips, and crushes the bassist beneath it. In the dawn, silence. Cliff Burton is 24 and forever. The survivors stand in the snow, stunned, guilty, terrified of the future. There are photographs of the wreckage. There are almost no words. Metallica could have ended there. Many bands do when the anchor is cut loose. Instead, they swore to keep moving because stopping would be a different death. They hired Jason Newsted to hold the low end and return to the studio. The album that followed, And Justice for All, was a labyrinth. Long, jagged songs stitched with riffs like barbed wire. The bass was almost absent in the mix, as if grief itself had been muted. Fans still argue whether that was technical choice, emotional avoidance, or both. Either way, the record sounded like a lawsuit set to drums, and the single One made televised darkness mainstream. Then came 1991 and the black cover that swallowed radio whole. Bob Rock sanded the edges, slowed the tempos, and sculpted a sound that could level stadiums. Purists yelled sellout while the rest of Earth learned every snare crack by heart. Metallica became the biggest heavy band, which meant the stakes, and the scrutiny, would only grow sharper. The mid-90s tested the brand. Load and Reload traded thrash for groove, blues, and eyeliner. Hair was cut, tempos eased, anger simmered instead of boiling. Some fans called betrayal, others heard evolution. Either way, the band learned a lesson every giant learns. The price of reinvention is court-sized opinion. On a hot summer night in 1992, Montreal watched James Hetfield walk into a column of flame during a pyrotechnic cue gone wrong. Skin blistered. A voice fought panic. A band refused collapse. Guns N' Roses cut their set early. The city rioted. Metallica healed and toured again, a scar woven into the set list. Resilience became part of the myth. The next scandal arrived not from a stage but from a server. In 2000, the band discovered an unreleased track circulating freely on Napster. Metallica sued, dragging a dorm room revolution into federal court. To fans raised on tape trading and bootlegs, their heroes suddenly looked like bankers guarding vaults. Yet beneath the optics was a simple claim: artists should choose how their work travels. The case ended with Napster crippled and a new era of paid digital music looming. Internally, the machine was overheating. Alcohol, control, pride, exhaustion, the usual poisons, spilled into the writing of Saint Anger. The cameras kept rolling. Some Kind of Monster, the documentary, trapped every argument and therapy session in amber. Lars defending his art like a territory. James leaving for rehab and returning with boundaries. Kirk playing mediator while the songs searched for their center. Many mocked the record's trash can snare and the absence of solos. Others heard a band refusing to lie about the cost of survival. Against odds, they stabilized. New bassist Robert Trujillo arrived with a grin and a gorilla grip right hand. Tours sold out again. The band returned to classic tones without abandoning the scars that made them interesting. The San Francisco Symphony collaboration evolved from stunt to statement. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame called. Old enemies shared a stage. What was once a case file of grudges turned into testimony about endurance. Of course, more debate followed. A collaboration with Lou Reed produced Lulu, a brutal art metal monolith some called unlistenable and others called brave. Critics sharpened knives. The band shrugged and moved forward. By then, the verdicts mattered less than the attempt. They had already stood trial in public enough times to know that risk is the only way to keep a giant heart beating. Metallica's crimes, if we call them that, were public growth spurts executed at stadium volume. They sued the future and survived the memes. They buried a friend and kept his ghost in the set. They let the world watch them fall apart and then asked that same world to show up when the doors reopened. Sometimes the verdict was guilty of hubris. Most nights, it was a hung jury decided by a final chorus of 50,000 witnesses. Listen close and you can still hear the original motive, momentum. Downstrokes like hammers, drums like marching orders, a voice that learned to turn pain into perimeter. The miracle is not that Metallica became massive. The miracle is that they remained human enough to fail in front of us and still climb back on stage. In an era that cancels at the first misstep, they pled messy, paid costs, and played louder. If vinyl holds fingerprints, theirs are smudged with grease, ash, and stubborn light. Spin the records. Hear the van doors slam, the bus veer, the gavel fall, the therapist clear his throat, the crowd forgive, the riff insist. Justice was never blind here. It was deafening, imperfect, and alive. And maybe that's the only kind that lasts.